Hey guys, welcome back to the Max Impact Theory. This is the continuation of the series from last week, so I hope you guys enjoy.
So that kind of brings us to our next section, where Justin's going to talk a little bit more about kind of like sustainable farming practices.
So my problem with the GMO obviously isn't like the health risks or whatever, because they've done studies and there's not enough research into it, but the research that they have done shows that there's little to none, no risk because of them.
You mean eating the plant?
Genetically modified plants.
So what risk are you worried about?
The risk that I have is, it's not really a human risk, it's more environmental, but it's so obviously using a lot of when you have a genetically modified plant that has a lot higher resistance to pesticides and chemicals, you can use more on it. Mm-hmm. And so when you use more on it, there's a lot more drainage off, because that's going into streams.
And then you don't know where that stuff's going.
Certain areas, that are using certain chemicals that are like too high of a volume of chemicals will go into the streams and forests and stuff like that, and animals will suffer from it.
So we're talking about, since there's different types of GMOs, we're talking about the type of GMO that's very resistant to Roundup, which is the chemical they use to spray for pests, right?
Yeah, well, okay. So they do
just for clarification.
They do a concoction of it's like an animal pesticide and a weed killer at the same time, and so you can spray it. It'll keep the animals away, and it'll keep the weeds. It'll kill the weeds.
Are we talking animals like insects, or are we talking like animals like deer?
Like insects, possibly like small rodents and stuff like that. I guess it depends on what you're growing. Yeah. Like if you're growing cabbage, you probably want to keep like the squirrels and groundhogs and rabbits away. But because you're spraying more of it, it has more volume running off. Like I think if you're using like a small amount of it or something that's a little more organic based, it will be less harmful to the environment around it. And that's not even my biggest concern. My biggest concern is how bad it is for the ground that they're growing it on.
Yeah.
So once you use all those chemicals, it completely bleaches the ground of all nutrients. And the ground's literally just like dust.
So they basically have to just move to a different area.
But they can't move it to a different area. So what they do is they just get a bunch of fertilizer, but not natural fertilizer, because it'd be way too much to use natural fertilizer. So they're using chemical fertilizer to revitalize the soil so they could do it again. But then the plants aren't getting enough nutrients, so they have to put more fertilizer, and they have to put boosters, this, that, and the other thing, and it's really far from the way that our ancestors have farmed. And our ancestors have farmed off of I think the word is ecology of...
Yeah, it's like a closed loop system.
Yeah, of animals, it's like a circle of animals feeding off of other animals, feeding off of other animals, feeding off of plants.
Yeah.
And then the excrements from those animals help feed the plants, and it's rotation and stuff like that. So crop and livestock rotation. I'm going to be concentrating more on livestock rotation today, and basically like sustainable meat production of that.
Well, before we go into that, I want to tell you this, not quite farming, but talking about the pesticides and the GMOs and stuff like that is I'm really into this guy. His name's Dave Knorr, and he wrote this book called Hidden Wars, and he actually was a fish and game warden for California State, and he was the first to discover marijuana growers in public lands.
Yeah,
now,
I remember you telling me about this.
And everybody goes, oh, well, that's not bad. Like, nowadays marijuana doesn't seem to be a, 4-letter word. But they don't realize that when he starts explaining how these plants were grown, they basically dump these chemicals on the marijuana plants. Highly toxic chemicals. And these chemicals are on the plants, and they actually call it poison marijuana, the marijuana that's produced from these, and that most people that are purchasing marijuana in the United States that's not through an authorized grower is getting this poison marijuana.
And is it for like is keeping animals away from it basically?
Yeah, so this stuff is so poisonous that it keeps insects, animals, like basically everything away from the plant. And it's so bad that he even has pictures in his book, he says, where, a deer will go and eat a piece of it, and then the deer will die. And then along will come a fox, and the fox will eat the deer, and the fox will die right next to the deer. That's how toxic this is. And then a vulture will come down and eat the fox. And the vulture will die.
Along.
And basically, he says they basically have like dead animals all around the field.
So I guess eventually it becomes pretty easy to figure out where these guys are growing because there's just like a carcass circle around it.
Yeah, I guess so. But going back to your thing about the runoff is, that's a huge concern because these sites would have all this poisonous chemical, and then that would drain off into the waterways, and then it would start around the waterways where these things were. The reason why they originally found his first site he found with a biologist, because the biologist couldn't figure out why all the trout had died and all the fish in this stream were dead.
Yeah. And
that's where they found their first field of cartel grown marijuana.
Uh-huh.
So
with the chemical runoff for like pesticides and stuff, it's not so much once or twice, it's the buildup of it in the water systems. Like you have ponds and creeks that run to ponds, or you have like marshy areas or something like that. The chemicals will collect, and therefore
they'll start to concentrate.
Yeah, it'll concentrate, and that's when it becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
And when you're doing this every year, and then you're putting your fertilizer, which also has lots of chemicals in it, that's becoming a runoff, then you basically make chemical and toxic cesspools.
Yeah,
in the area.
And that's why I wanted to bring this up, is maybe it's not as extreme of a case, but we are slightly doing this on a constant basis by farming in that way. So so let's go into better practices.
So there was there's this thing where most people will do a single species farm. Right? So you'll be like a cattle farm where all you have is cows.
All chickens.
I don't think there's very big goat populations, but
corn and soybeans,
like
huge.
All turkey farms, or maybe they'll do turkey and chicken, but they're not really different. They're different species, but they're both birds. It's not like a cow and a chicken.
Yeah.
So having multi-species fields is actually really beneficial, because it becomes a codependent ecosystem. So the cows will poop, which attracts bugs. And it also has bacterial and fungal microbials in it. The chickens will pick through and scratch the poop, so they'll eat the bugs in it, which
kind of spreads tills.
They'll spread it
and till it.
Yeah, it's basically spreading it. There's free fertilizer spreading, and you get eggs out of the deal, and chickens if you're doing, and like meat if you're doing meat chickens. But they're also eating the fungal and bacterial microbials in it.
I keep on trying to get chickens because I keep on telling my wife they eat ticks. Yeah, my wife hates ticks.
But so the poop attracts like flies and stuff like that. And the thing about flies is it actually really stresses cows out, because they're all over them.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so when you have chickens following them, they eat the larvae and the eggs, and they eat the actual flies, and so you don't really have a fly problem then.
Okay.
It's also spread, like I said, bacterial and fungal microbials are eaten, and because the bacteria and the microbials that they get from the cows, they're not cross-species danger.
Yeah.
Like basically, so most cattle farms will have to like inject their cows with ringworm and other cow-related diseases, but because the chickens are actually picking through and spreading it and getting rid of the bad stuff, you don't have to vaccinate your cows because the chickens are actually getting rid of it. So it fertilizes the grass, which is also, you don't have to go out there and spread manure all over your fields to make the grass grow.
Okay, so you're saying that the first species you bring into this field is cattle.
No, you do it together at the same time.
Okay, cattle and chicken.
Because the cows and chickens aren't competing for the same food.
Okay.
So there's not going to be much of a problem. So this one guy that I saw, he has his cattle farm, and then he has his cattle farm, and then he has his chickens in like a coop that he hooks up to a 4-wheeler and like wheels it around to the different pastures behind the cows.
Yeah.
And so he basically just has them tag team, but he gets the eggs every morning because they go into the cart and lay, and then he can like so it's a really efficient and well thought out. He said people ask how you got to this conclusion. He's like, just trial and error.
Yeah. I love those, talking about chickens, I love those chicken tractors. Did you ever see that? Where it's like the chickens are in a coop and to protect them from predators, and they eat in the grass. And then the next day they come and and these things are huge, and they are on wheels, and they just kind of move the chicken to the next part of the field and then let them feed and eat all the bugs. And then they, kind of chicken poop into the grass, and then and it goes all the way across the field. And then the field now is more fertile too.
Yeah, and that was the other thing is like, so the chickens are pooping too, and chicken poop is also very, good fertilizer. So now the cows are getting certain nutrients from the grass. But the problem is when you have a cow in a area for too long, it eats the grass at once. And cows are really smart, so they know what their body needs, so they know what plants to eat for what nutrients.
That's why you get the saying, grass is always greener, right? Because they're always looking for the greener grass.
So this guy will actually rotate his cows every day.
To a different field.
Every day they're in a different field.
Okay.
And so what happens is each field has all of the grasses and stuff. He also doesn't fertilize his fields that much. And what he does is, off of cow manure for in the pens and stuff like that, he doesn't have to buy fertilizer. He doesn't have to fertilize too much because of his chicken-cow combo. But they know what nutrients they need. But when you keep a cow for a week or a couple weeks in the same pen, first they eat the stuff that they need, and then they'll eat the other stuff that they had before, and then they'll actually be starving for nutrients off of grass, and then the pastures get all matted down, and there's not as much grass, and it's just a constant fight to try to get the grass to grow enough for the cows to have enough food. But when you move it every day, only certain species of plants are gone, and it's not like completely like bogged down, so you don't have to start the ground from scratch. And most of the time they won't even eat all of the same plants if they're getting moved every day.
Okay.
And so they can still
they
pollinate each other and reproduce.
So
grass.
they eat their preferred plants instead of like kind of a secondary plant that's not as
right. Because if they're
for
in the same spot, then you need to give them minerals and a bunch of supplements because they're not getting the stuff they need from the grass. Now this guy still has it out just in case they do need it, but he's like, I use like 1/10 of what most people use.
Okay.
And most of the time when he has when he has cows going for the minerals and stuff is when they're pregnant.
Okay.
Because they just want more.
Yeah, they need more.
Yeah.
To get those baby cows out.
Yeah, so you're getting dairy. You do that with dairy cows, or you're getting meat cows. So you're getting beef from it, and you're getting eggs, or you're getting poultry meat, all from spending less money on fertilizer, spending less. Like he said that he had to feed his cows hay 1 week out of the whole winter last year.
Where is this guy located at, by the way?
I don't remember. I think it's
is he in a warmer?
It's Midwest, I think.
Is he in a warmer climate or a cooler than us?
No.
Okay.
He's
I was just wondering because if you're in a warmer,
his name's Joe Salatin.
Yeah. If you're in a colder environment, then you would actually have to have do some haying of the fields for winter.
Well, he does
feed.
do haying, but he said that because he rotates them so much that the grass doesn't die as fast, and so they can still graze through the snow and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not south. It's like Midwest kind of thing.
Midwest. Okay.
Yeah. So we talked about the flies, which also have so if you're doing dairy cows, they have a harder time producing milk, and you get less milk production because they're stressed out. They're not going to produce as much milk.
Okay.
And so the chickens really help out with that stress
So
of
there's
the
an
flies.
advantage.
Yeah. Now
I would be stressed out if I had a lot of flies on me all the time.
Yeah. Now, places that don't do the chicken thing, what they have to have is when they bring the cows to get milked, they milk them, and then they'll shove them through a, then they have to go through like this narrow passageway to get out to the pasture again. And they have this little place where they stop, and it's like this giant vacuum that vacuums all the flies off of them when they go through.
Oh.
And so, like, it's a pretty expensive machine, but they don't have to do that because they have chickens.
So they pay for the machine and they don't use it?
Yeah. And the other thing is this guy also has what they call forest fields, where it's a bunch of really healthy grass, but it's also a lot of trees. And what happens with the trees is the cows get shade, instead of a clear-cut field where they can't really get out of the sun. And spiders obviously know where to get bugs, and when there's flies and bugs on these cows, the cows will go under the trees for shade, and then the spiders will make webs, and the bugs will get caught in the webs. So trees are, multifaceted benefits.
In this area, I've seen some of the farms with cows during the summer, and there's one tree, and they're all under it.
And there's no grass there because it's all stomped out.
Yeah, they're all under it. So the trees shade is obviously important for cattle, at least during the summer.
Yeah. And so the dairy cows, they will, produce more milk because they have less of the stress from the flies. And then when you do the milk, when they process the milk, you'll keep the cream in the milk, and then there's also skim. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they'll give skim to their pigs, and their pigs love it. So they're not wasting any part of the milk
Pigs
either.
love anything.
And then the pigs also have a really big benefit to the cows as well. So, not really the cows in general, more like the farmer. So you can use pigs as tiller machines.
Okay.
So what this guy will do, first let's start off with how he does his fertilizer. So the farmer will have the cow feeders on a pulley system from the ceiling, and so he can raise the troughs height. And so what he does is he will have them hung from the rafters, and when the cow poops, he'll have a layer of cow manure. Then he'll put wood chips down, and then the cows will poop again, and he puts wood chips down, and the cows will poop and wood chips, and cows will poop and wood chips. And so that floor gets like 4 or 5 feet higher by the end of the winter than it was before. And so it's a really good then he'll just go in there, scoop it all out, and then, he has fertilizer. Now, the thing is at the end of the winter, in the spring, there'll be 200 tons of manure in the barn.
Okay.
200 tons is a lot. And so the reason he puts the wood chips down is because it is his carbon base.
So it keeps it from smelling.
It keeps it from smelling. It doesn't smell. It keeps it from rotting, because what it can do, it can actually rot. And he said it can rot and become almost like formaldehyde, which it's actually toxic to the plant, so he wouldn't be able to use it as fertilizer if he keeps it there. So traditionally what they'll do is they'll take the layer out, they'll scoop it, and they'll go they have to pick it up and put it in a pile and kind of row it out like in it like a tube
Woodrow.
almost.
Don't they go Woodrows or something like that?
Yeah, something like that, and so it'll aerate and not because if it's smashed down by the cow stepping on it and stuff like that, then it will actually rot instead of being
and you're
aerated.
Getting composting from you're getting composting from like vermicompost too at the same time, because I'm sure worms come up from the ground and start working on that compost, aerating it more. I've seen some guys where they actually wet those things down so that they can bring up the temperature too. It brings up the temperature.
Okay.
And which makes the composting happen a lot quicker too.
Now he doesn't do that. He doesn't take it out. He keeps it on the floor and then he uses it.
Oh, he keeps it in there.
So what he does is so the manure is being stomped down by the cows, and so that helps keep the bacteria down, but then it would turn into like formaldehyde equivalent and kill the plant. So that's why he has the carbon to actually preserve it.
Yeah.
So it just basically it makes the shelf life of it longer, so it can stay there all winter. And if it doesn't, then it'll smell bad and it'll basically rot and be toxic. So in the spring, he'll have 200 tons of manure in the barn. He didn't have to do any work. All he had to do was spread some wood chips in there.
Yeah.
He'll also put corn kernels in there, and that's for, I'll tell you about that in a second. So the carbon layer, he'll put that down, and that'll preserve it. And then he'll let the pigs come in the spring.
So we're basically
the manure.
So we're saying for composting purposes, you always say there's green and brown. Now in this case, the brown would be the cow poo.
Yeah.
And the green would be the cow poo, and the brown would be the wood chips, which combines to make a good compost mixture.
Mm-hmm. And then he'll let the pigs in there, and what the pigs will do, they'll actually dig through all 4 feet of it.
For the corn?
For the corn.
Yeah, is that what the corn's for?
They also do it for the hay that drops, because they'll put a layer of hay down sometimes where the hay will just drop, and they'll just poop on top of it.
Yeah, pigs will go for anything.
The pigs, it's like drugs to them when it's fermented. When it's fermented grain, because it has like this. Apparently, it has this sweet taste to them.
Yeah, it's like
it's like candy.
Well, it's kind of like when you have the what do they call that? When you take barley for beer, and they basically sprout it, and then that's what's used to make your wort to make your beer.
Yeah.
So, and that's pretty sweet when it goes through that process, because it goes from being starch. The starch converts itself into kind of a sugar, and then they probably eat it. And a lot of times when you eat that stuff, it ferments in your stomach. So, are you saying that the pigs are a little drunk?
No, I don't think that they get like
or they just like
from it. They just it's their favorite.
Oh,
thing.
It's like one of their favorite foods. Okay.
Yeah. And so what they'll do is they'll dig through all of the layers, because they put corn down. There'll be hay there, so they'll dig through all the layers and re-aerate it, because it's basically dormant with a shelf life because of the longer shelf life because of the wood chips and the carbon in the wood chips. And then they aerate it, and then all he does is scoop it out and put it in a pile, and he's ready to like use it for whatever. If he like wants some extra, fertilizer on a field that's needs a little help or something like that.
The fact that they eat the seeds like that too probably keeps you from getting it to sprout in the fields when you don't want it there.
He also doesn't have to feed his pigs.
Yeah, that's true. Pigs will eat anything.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate.
And so what they also do with their pigs, if they want to make a new pasture, especially wooded pastures, they will send the pigs into a wooded area and put a portable like electric fence around it so nothing gets out or in, and they'll leave it there for a time period of 5 to 12 days.
So we're talking about a wooded area.
Wooded area, or you could do a normal pasture.
Okay.
But it's not like a nice pasture. It's got a bunch of weeds and briars and stuff like that. So instead of getting in there with backhoes and whatever and like clear cutting it and trying to ripping all the briars out and stuff like that.
Okay, you send the pigs in.
Let
me guess, goats are involved too.
So he doesn't do goats.
Oh, he doesn't do goats.
And we could talk. Why don't we talk about that real quick? Hey guys, that's the end of our second part of our 3-part series. We'll be wrapping it up next week, so I hope you guys tune in. Don't forget, you guys can contact us by email at thetheory@maximpactkarate.com, and we will see you guys next week.